I needed scale thin rod bent in different shapes for added detail on my Tamiya 222, but every time I bent this rod, it kept springing right back into its original shape until I learned a simple heat trick that allowed me to get the perfect bends that I wanted, and I was able to make detail like this. Stick around and I'll show you how this simple heat trick has changed my scratch building. But first I want to show you a few details I've added to the hull. The next detail I'd like to add to my armored car is a jack. Now the kit comes with this jack here, and it's not horrible. It was on the other side though, has a sink mark in it. That would have been kind of tough to fill. See that little guy right there? But I've seen a lot of jacks on these 222s that had a different profile. So I dug out some pictures and I came up with this. And a little side note, you guys don't be afraid to make mistakes. I have all sorts of failed attempts at parts to this jack. This little piece right here is one of them. So, you know, the idea is to have fun, and you're going to make some mistakes. So what? Just keep on trucking. That's just part of the fun. So you got the front and the back of the jack here, and this is the pad that kind of goes on that wooden block you always see with German vehicles. And then these little guys will be situated on here with the I don't know if you can see on here this. I'll turn it into light. There we go. You can see those little whatever they are is on there that I've tried to replicate with this. And then of course I used some evergreen channel, glued two pieces together, and then filed on them a little bit to come up with that part that actually does the jacking. Let's see if you can see it on here. That little, well, where is it? Right there. So once again, like this piece here, this is the upper end, this little guy here. I just didn't like how it looked. And if I can get it into a little bit of shadow here, you can see that I've got four little prongs on the end of it that I made out of rod. I just cut them and glued them on there, and I just don't like how it looks. So I started to work on this piece of strip, making the profile that I wanted, and it turned out a lot better. And as you can see, it's still attached, which just is super helpful when you're working with small pieces to have something larger to handle. There's two other pieces that I fiddled around with, and they go underneath of this crank. So this is the handle that you actually do the jacking with. It mounts somewhere on here, and it just, as you can imagine, you just in a circular motion jacks up the jack. Well, there's a little ratchet type of a thing that goes right underneath this. So I started to work on part of that right here. Once again, I've got it attached, still attached to this piece of strip styrene, but this right here is what it's going to be. It's a little lever that works a ratchet, so you can either jack it up or jack it down, and so this will end up with a little radius right here. And the other part, which was kind of fun, and I don't know if I'll be able to use it yet, but I just took some little strips of styrene and I glued it around this rod. And what I'm going to do is trim all of these off. I left them long so it'd be easier to handle. So we'll see how it works. I might have to scrap it and try something else, but it'll be our experiment, and I'll let you know how it works in our final video. But oh, and let me tell you this too. Down here where I've drilled these holes, so this two pieces of plastic that I've sandwiched together, and there's, I guess they're rivets that go into these holes. So I'm going to use stretched sprue to go in there, since it'll be the finest thing I have. I don't have any rod that's fine enough, otherwise it'll look kind of clunky. But anyway, there's my jack, and I hope it turns out good. I decided to make a new shovel for this little guy. This is the one that's provided in the kit, And to be fair to Tamiya, I did see one picture of sdkfz 222 that had a shovel about that size. But for the most part, they were quite a bit larger than that one. So I decided to make one. First thing I did was to draw a little picture of the shovel head. It's a little oversized. I did that on a piece of about 40 thousandths styrene, and I cut it out and started to sand it to shape. And once that was done, you'll see a picture of it here, but once I had that done, I kind of hollowed this part out right here so I could add a piece of rod. Now on these German shovels, as you can see on this guy, there's a knob on the end. So the way I do that, after trying to melt one several times and not coming out the way I wanted it, I just started to take a larger rod, larger than the handle of the shovel, and I started to carve, if I can get it to, there we go. Started to carve a ball on the end of it. And when I was done, I just cut it off and I glued it on to the end of the shovel handle, and then I ferreted in a little bit with some epoxy putty. Now there's a clamp, which is this guy right here. It's not glued on yet, so it'll move down the handle just a bit, give you an idea of what it looks like. I made that out of a piece of aluminum from a soda can, kind of like this stuff here, just really thin aluminum. So I cut some strips like that, and that's what I made this out of. So I think it's a little bit undersized, but I don't know if you guys can really see the profile of it, but there's a different style German clamp for about every day of the week. So it's kind of hard to be wrong with what you do. So I chose one that looked more or less like this, and I think it's going to add a lot to that third dimension, I guess, the more 3D look with this detail, instead of just being a generic little blob on here like Tamiya has. And for this side of it, the way it's connected to the vehicle, it's not a strap, but it's a piece of steel that's welded onto the hole into which the nose of the shovel will fit. And I made this out of a piece of lead foil. You could also do that out of this aluminum just as easily. Here's another example of some of the limitations of the molding process back when this kit was made. This guy here is the driver's width gauge. So these guys, it's a width marker, I should say, that goes on the front fenders, and sometimes even like on the 8-wheeled armored cars, they had these on the back fenders too. But this goes up on the fenders, and it's just, I'll show you some pictures of the real thing. This is just too thick, especially the upper part of it. So this is what I came up with. You can see the difference in the scale of it. So I just have a piece of rod down here, which I drilled a little hole in the end of it to accept this brass rod, which is fairly thin. It's at least half as thick as the kit part. Then I punched out a little disc and drilled a hole in it, which is what this is. And that's going to be the flange that basically would be bolted to the fender. And then for the little ball that they put on the end of these, once again, I just carved that out of this piece of rod and sanded it smooth. And then before I separate it from this piece of rod here, I will take a little needle and I'll poke the end of it so it'll be a guide for a drill bit. And I'll drill that hole so that little brass rod will fit into it. And on the driver's side, they actually, on some of these, they've mounted a mirror to the width indicator. And so that mirror will be mounted on there. And I'll put some tin foil or something on there to make it reflective like a mirror. So it should look pretty cool once it's done. I wanted to have my front wheels turned a little bit to the left. I don't know why I chose left, but anyway, I just thought it would look a little more dynamic. And so I just thought, well, I'll just turn the wheels. Well, of course, if I turn the wheels, it's going to expose the hub, which is represented by this guy right here. And blessed to me his heart, it's just not even close to what the hub actually looks like. I'll throw in a picture here of an actual hub on one of these armored cars. So what I did to try and replicate that, it looks like a big cast piece of iron. And so I found some tubing in my parts box. And if I measure it for you guys, let's see, get my micrometers out. It is, what, just over, no, you can see there. So this happens to fit right over that hub. So couldn't have had a better fit. But that hub itself is tapered. So it's a little wider at one end than it is the other. So what I did is I took a file, and you can't really see it on this guy, but let me get my tweezers. So the part I'm holding in the tweezers is a smaller circumference outside diameter than it is on the part that's away from my tweezers. And you'll also see that the edge of it kind of looks like a roller coaster kind of a profile. Well, it's higher on the top and bottom than it is on the front and the back. As you can see, it's kind of a scallop look. So I just did that. I narrowed it down a little bit by taking a file and removing some of this plastic to make it thinner. So it is pretty thin if you look at it from this direction. I've taken away quite a bit of the material. Then I just used some little 10,000 strip to start putting in these little stiffeners all the way around it. Here's what the finished one looks like. So I've added some bolts to try and replicate the bolts. Once again, trying to make it look like that picture. And granted, this will be underneath the vehicle and behind the wheel, so not a lot of visibility for this thing. But what the heck, it was fun to build. So I've got a couple coats of primer on there so far, and that tends to hide some of the little scrape and scratch marks that I get on there when I'm trying to sand it or get the profiles of everything just right. So sometimes a little thick primer can be your friend. So the No-Tech light, in most of the pictures that I'm looking at, have a cage around them, which of course this kit doesn't come with. So I was wondering, how am I going to make this? The first thought that came to mind was I was going to make it out of brass wire, and that necessitated either super gluing or soldering. So here's one of my first attempts, which is horrible. Not good at all. So didn't make the cut. And then I tried this guy. Getting a little better. Still no good. So I got as far as this guy. Even got the side piece put on there, so it's looking a little better. Got to file down some of the solder, and it was almost acceptable, but still, as you can see, those gussets where the solder is just way too heavy. No bueno. So I started thinking, since I had some really thin rod made of styrene, how could I make this work? So I tried to bend it, and it would have been okay if I had something to secure both sides, which I wasn't going to have. So I tried being very careful and heating this up over a candle, and it didn't work at all. Either it's not anywhere hot enough or way too hot all of a sudden and you've melted it. And then I tried boiling water to see if I could get it to soften this plastic rod, and then I could hold it in the shape I wanted while it cooled, hoping it would stick. But the boiling water wasn't doing it either. So I stopped to think for a minute. What other sources of heat did I have that I might be able to control? And the thought came to my mind, I have a space heater. So I was going to give it a shot. But with the space heater, if it was going to work, how was I going to get the plastic in the shape that I wanted? So I happen to have these drawings by Uwe Feist. They're in 1/35 scale, so just the right scale I needed. And it had a neat profile, both from the side here, and if I move it, you can see also from the front down here. So I thought if I cut those out and I mounted them to a piece of wood like this, would that do the trick? So I was going to try. Let me show you how it works. So I've got my little heater putting out some decent heat. Make sure that you use an abundance of caution when doing this. I don't want you to burn yourself or burn down your model room. Mine is such that I can stand to get kind of close to the heat without it hurting too much. So let me show you how this worked. I'll have to kind of wrap the plastic around my mold and try not to pull on it too tight because it'll actually stretch the sprue, which you don't want. So let's see what happens here. And that's getting kind of warm on my fingers. But I move it around a little bit and it's okay. And it gets soft so I can kind of form it. So I need to work it just a little bit more. So this is kind of the result. And it's held that shape. Now this isn't perfect and I had to throw away a lot more than I made that worked, but you get the idea. So what I was able to do using those different profiles from the copy of that picture, so you see this guy has the front end view, that's the side view I just showed you, and then of course this I made for the little bracket that protects the turn signals. So here's how it turned out. I made a little bracket to go into the fender. Now, where's my pointer here? Here's the attachment point to the fender. On the driver's side rear fender, there was a no-tech tail light that was protected by some sort of a little cage to keep it from getting dinged up. So I had to heat form some of that to make it look right. And then on the other side, there's just a regular tail light, stop light, that also has a cage of bent and welded steel rod around it. So I had to try and replicate that once again using the heat bent sprue. And on this guy, as you can see, there's a little bracket that I made out of some sheet styrene. It's at an angle. These two boxes mount on the back of the fenders, and so they're at an angle, not quite 45 degrees, but I had to make a bracket on the back of each one to make the lights set level once they're mounted on that angled fender. So to make this housing for the stoplight, I just took a piece of styrene rod and used progressively larger drill bit to thin down the walls and make it more or less kind of a scale thickness. And then I had a flat piece of clear acetate that I took my punch and punched a little disc out to replicate the lens over the stoplight. So that's it for this video, gang. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to go back if you haven't already and watch my videos where I detail the gun and also the turret, and I'll leave a link for both of those right here. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you soon.